Is the psychotherapy assisted treatment protocol that you like to use, um, is it dealing with the conscious mind, the unconscious mind? Because I did a hypnosis session for the first time ever in my life last week with this guy in one of my men's community, and that was kind of a bizarre experience. Like, I noticed my aura ring picked up on it as sleep, like it picked up on it as REM and deep sleep, but I
Cool.
felt somewhat conscious during the experience. I'm just wondering what the strategy is with field trip with that stuff.
Yeah, it's both. I mean, the thing that happens when you're on a psychedelic trip is it really opens up the unconscious mind and brings it into the conscious. So you can, kind of like remembering a dream. Like a dream is an unconscious experience, but you can remember a dream and bring it into the conscious mind. And that's exactly what happens with psychedelics, which is the psychedelic opens your unconscious mind. Very often you'll become aware of something that you didn't become aware of on a neurobiological perspective. They've actually done fMRIs, which is a functional magnetic resonance imaging work with people on psychedelics. And what they see when you're on a psychedelic, at least with psilocybin, and I can send you the pictures, parts of the brain start talking to each other that either don't talk very frequently or never talk to each other. And so all of a sudden your brain is making these connections across cross-functional areas of literally your brain mass. And that's why people all of a sudden will report either re-experiencing something from childhood, or they'll notice like music speaks to them on a different level, or color has way more pronounced effect or emotional impact, because you have essentially synesthesia happening in your brain as a result of the psychedelic. And so often people have memories or insights or create awareness that stays with them. People often forget their dreams, but generally people are able to remember their psychedelic experiences. And then when you go into the therapy, you take what your unconscious mind revealed and talk through it on a conscious level, which, if you go into the psychology and philosophy of it, most people would say would then, affect your unconscious mind afterwards. But that's a sort of separate conversation.
Interesting. Man, I got a lot of questions here. So, the man, let me start with this. So I talk to a lot of guys with the regular content production that I put on my channel, because one of the things that kind of pivoted me with what I was doing, I remember when I was talking to you, about setting up this channel, I think it was 2014 that I did, you're like, yeah, what are you up to? And I was telling you about the channel, and I was probably around that time just hanging out with entrepreneurs in the rides and just kind of interviewing them, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happened to me, which I didn't realize until probably a good year after the fact, was I had all the symptoms of PTSD from a unhealthy attachment to this one chick that I was dating at that time that I'd broken up with, right? Mm-hmm. And it took a little bit of self-discovery for myself, and it took but quite a few conversations that I had to have with other people, and diving down rabbit holes when it came to human nature, looking at EvoPsych and stuff like that. And it probably took me a good few years to really come to the realization. Even then, to this day, I still feel a little bit of vulnerability to like a condition that the red pill calls one-itis, right? Where you can have an unhealthy attachment to one woman when you can't let go of something, sort of thing. And I see a lot of guys have it just because they subscribe to a belief system that doesn't accurately reflect human behavior and nature. Like, a lot of guys will watch a lot of Disney stuff and pay a lot of attention to media and the news, and they'll think, oh, sugar and spice and all things nice. Mm-hmm. And, how could this woman possibly, alter the course of my life? Yet there's men every day going through the divorce machine that take their own lives, right? Mm-hmm. So, like with stuff like this, is this application broader than just dealing with something like PTSD? Like, is this something that can be used for, there's a lot of people on SSRIs, dealing with depression. I know you talked about not particularly wanting to focus on that, but how broad is the scope of treatment that field trip can, really participate in?
It's incredibly broad. It's a little bit of science, but it's a little bit of terminology, which is, in your particular reference, it's like, yeah, you had PTSD. Most people think about PTSD as being something associated with veterans, but any trauma experience can create its own instance. They talk about how in the community and this current scientific belief is that there's no such thing as a bad trip if you grew up in the 80s like I did, or earlier, you probably watched all sorts of like dare to not do drugs videos, and this is your brain on,
This is like your
this is
brain
your
on
brain.
drugs with a frying pan with the eggs
Yeah,
in it.
exactly, and all that kind of stuff, or like people jumping out of windows.
Scared the shit out of everybody.
Yeah, exactly. People jumping out of windows after doing LSD and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And listen, the truth is like that did happen. It didn't happen with nearly the frequency you would think, based on what we were taught. But there are risks. There's powerful molecules. But generally, the belief is that there's no such thing as a bad trip per se. There are hard trips and there are easy trips. Easy trips are exactly what you'd expect, wonderful colors, feelings of love, unity, all of these positive emotions. And there are hard trips that can get dark and scary and challenging, and really challenge your sense of self-identity. Now, a hard trip can become a bad trip if it's not given with the right therapeutic support. Most psychedelic therapists will say, like, if you encounter something terrifying during a trip, don't run away from it, go towards it, because there's something to be learned. Your unconscious mind is telling you something that you need to confront and process. But if you don't do it with the right supports, if you feel scared, it can actually create its own instance of PTSD. That's only in your mind. And if people kind of wonder about it, it's like, think about like having a nightmare. You wake up from a nightmare and you're scared, right? It's affected you. You're physically, your fight or flight system is engaged. The same thing can happen with a trip, but it can go much deeper than most bad dreams would. So PTSD is an experience that's much broader than just being present in war. And all of us experience traumas. In the work I've done, with Erwin, who's my coach, or I don't even know how you describe him. When you're a kid, you experience traumas. You have to. How many times do your parents say no to something you want to do? And so what kids do is they kind of build up emotional walls because they don't want to constantly be angry about being told, no, don't stick your finger in that. No, don't pick that up. And so it's a lifelong journey to process all of these traumas and feelings and emotions and take down those emotional walls. And to the extent that psychedelics are opening your unconscious mind to new experiences, new perspectives, they can be used across any number of potential applications. And within our clinics, we're somewhat restricted jurisdiction by jurisdiction because of guidance from the colleges, but general rule is within field trip, we'll treat any form of mental health condition, ranging from the most severe treatment-resistant depression to people who just have adjustment disorder or dysthymia, which is basically they're feeling low, they're feeling sad, and they can't seem to bust out of it. And all of them can potentially benefit, because at the end of the day, the mechanism of action is really the same, which is psychedelics by and large are rapid antidepressants. They make you feel happier almost immediately. But then they do two other things. One is they open your unconscious mind so you can revisit things that may have been packed away or that you're not willing to go into. And that your brain has put, or your mind has put, conscious walls against. So you can confront them and start to process that trauma. And then thirdly, they create a period of neuroplasticity. So what happens is your brain, when you have consistently, say, depressed thoughts, the more you have a consistent thought, the more that pathway in your brain gets cemented, and it makes it easier to have that thought over and over again. And so essentially what psychedelics do, as Michael Pollan described it, is if you can imagine like a lane with cross-country ski tracks in it, psychedelics are kind of like a fresh batch of powdery snow on top of that. So those old pathways that you're used to using can get essentially removed, and you can open up new pathways that may be more productive, more optimistic, happier. And so you have this period of neuroplasticity where the therapy really kicks in, where, if you're doing the cognitive behavioral therapy shortly after a psychedelic session and your therapist is using motivational interviewing or behavioral activation, these techniques that have been shown to work, they just take a long time, you're much more receptive to that. And so you can change your habits, you can change your outlooks much faster than you could if you're just doing cognitive behavioral therapy. So between these three layers of the immediate lift, the ability to process old experiences, and the neuroplasticity, that's across everything. You don't even have to have a mental health condition to potentially benefit from that.